sun come beautiful till it all burns out. We're like falling stars, miracles dancing on the ground. And we're right with you to feel it shrouded deep down. We're right with you, yeah. And we're right with you to feel it shrouded deep down. Suffering grows, yeah. You say that life is beautiful. Would you let me in? No, yeah. They say that life is beautiful. Would you let me in? No, yeah.
Hans, great to see you. Great.
Likewise.
Great to
Happy
be
holidays. Hope you've had a great holidays, and thanks for having me back on.
Here. Yeah. Merry Christmas. And so we are here and we're going to be talking about Khem, ancient Egypt.
A history that a lot of us don't really know about because we're taught an Egyptian history that fits a specific timeline, and quackademia keeps moving that timeline forward. And even though we keep finding stuff that's older and older, the ultimate question is what is Egypt? So again, thanks for having me back on. Excited to talk about this subject. I'm going to be talking about this in April at the Alchemy event in Los Angeles, which you also will be at with Alien event. And so it's nice to have like a refresher of the knowledge and travels that I've been on. So Egypt is an interesting one. Egypt is a Greek name. When the Greeks took over Egypt, they went into the city of Memphis, which now is a suburb of Cairo. A lot of it doesn't exist anymore because a lot of Cairo has taken over most of the ancient sites. But there was a placard in front of a temple. And the Greeks saw this and asked, what does this say? And their guides at that time said, this is Kepka-Ptah, okay? Kepka-Ptah. And this means, in the ancient Kemetian or Suf language, the place where the body of Ptah, the creator god, manifests. This is a very simplistic form of this because Ka has it's like your double. You have an astral double and a physical double. And so Ka is your physical double. And Ptah, to the ancients was the creator god, but it's an interesting word because it also means a lot more than that. So
I always felt like the Ka was the soul. And that's why I love my middle name, like the Ka. Man.
That's the Ba.
Mm.
So the Ba is your head on top of the body of a bird. And if you've ever seen the movie Spirited Away, Yaga Baba, or the woman that runs the Spirited Away bathing spa in the night, turns into a Ba. She transforms into the body of a bird and her head, and she flies out with her children into the night. So it's interesting that this even shows up in Japanime. But Kepka-Ptah. So this is the place where Ptah, the creation or the creator, manifests. And so the Greeks thought that possibly this was the name for the land. And so Kepka-Ptah became Hepkaptos, which is where we get the word Coptic, or the Coptic Christians from. We'll get back into that. Which then became Egyptos, which then another derivation of it became Egypt in modern times. When the Arabs took over Egypt, they kept the name Khem, the ancient name. Khem, Khm, was the name of the black alluvial soil, the fertility of the land of the black soil. But it didn't just pertain to the Nile as we see it today. It pertained to the Ur Nile, which was a spillover from the Mediterranean into the Sahara Desert that was over 100 miles wide. It stretched all the way from the Mediterranean into Sudan. And today it's buried underneath the desert because it's all desert now in the last 7,000 years. And interestingly, before Libya was taken out, they were doing a massive underwater reservoir project where they were trying to seclude all this water so that they could share it with Egypt, Sudan, and all the countries that bordered the Sahara, because they figured it was all their water because they all shared.
And how long was he doing that before he died? Gaddafi?
Oh, God. That's a good question. I did a project on this because they were leaving these massive cement structures in the middle of the desert that had gotten broken in shipment. And I was like, God, why can't we repurpose these? So I did a whole project on this. It was 2011, 2010, somewhere around there. They probably have been doing this for 20, 30 years since they discovered this underground water aquifer. And so they had to basically start figuring out how to secure it and pipe it to the different areas. And who knows what's happened to this since. Anyway, that was the Ur Nile. And back to Egypt, Khem, Egypt. And so Khem was this land of the alluvial soil from both sources of the Nile. As I said, Egypt was this Greek name. They kind of came in and they changed a lot of names, like the city of Heliopolis, which Heliopolis means the city of the sun. In the old language was the city of Un or On. And so this gets into kind of the Suf and Cometian belief in the circle of fives. And so we all think of, when we learn Egypt history, we think of the sun as Ra. Oh, it's Ra or it's Amun-Ra. These are the two names that we're always given as the name of the sun. Well, Ra is only one phase of the sun, and Amun-Ra is two phases of the sun. And it's interesting that they neglect the other three phases to bring up Amun-Ra, because Amun-Ra becomes the massive sun that comes out of darkness, if you translate it. So it's Amun is darkness, and Ra is this blazing sun. And so Amun-Ra is the massive sun that comes out of darkness. But this comes from 5 initial phases. And so the 5 phases would be Kepher, which is often seen as the scarab or the dung beetle holding the sun. And so the scarab in the morning, when the sun rises, will roll a ball of dung to the top of a hill or the top of a sand mound so that the sun can bake it. Inside of the dung is the beetle's seeds, and they will hatch and then have a food source, which is beyond fascinating. The second phase of the sun then is Ra. And so Ra is what we all know of as the sun. And we always see the one eye, the Ra, the eye of Ra, or as it's also known as the eye of Horus. There's a slight deviation between the two. But Horus is also seen as Ra because at this time of the day between, the morning sun and noon is when Horus, the falcon, rises and flies above the horizon. And so this is where the word horizon or Horus on the rising or hours or hour comes from, is Horus. And so Horus is seen as Ra. Ra is the adolescent, the uncontrollable sun. So then we have the third phase of the sun, which is afternoon, and it's called Un. This is where our word noon and Un come from. And it's known as the wise sun. And then we go into the fourth phase of the sun, which is Aten. And Aten is known as the enlightened or the wiser sun. And this is, for those of you who are surfers or skateboarding, fanatics, this is what we know of as the sunset hour. This is that sun as it's starting to get to the horizon and go into darkness. And it's like the best time to be out on the board and the waves, or, skate in the skate park, or even riding your mountain bike or doing whatever. It's the sunset sessions. And so that's Aten. That's the enlightened sun. And then it goes into Amun. And Amun is known as the darkness or the hidden sun. And so it goes through this full cycle, and then it comes back around. Interestingly, strangely, in movies, I like to quote movies a lot, we have Star Wars. And this is the story of Luke Skywalker. So Luke is Lucius, the sun, and he's walking the sky through his journey. And the closer he gets to the horizon, the more he goes through his hero's journey. And so in Star Wars 4, or the first Star Wars movie, he's wearing white. In the second movie, he's wearing gray. In the third movie, he's wearing black. and he comes across his dark father, the Dark Knight, and he fights his dark father through Amun, through darkness, only to be risen again. And so this is the cycle that comes across in the ancient Kemetian sun cycles. Amun is also where, in Christian belief, we get the prayer Amen. And so when we finish our prayer, for those who are Christian, and we say Amen at the end of the prayer, we're hoping that a higher being or the high Almighty will hear our prayer. But if we're using the Kemetian rules or the ancient Suf rules, Amen is Amun. And so you're basically burying your prayer in darkness, and nobody's going to hear it. And so this becomes an interesting aspect of that. And so Amun Ra is the hidden sun that rises. And so this is where they've taken the 5 elements of the sun in recent times and combined them into one. There's another series of 5 that come out of the ancient Kemetian or Suf belief. And this is the belief of the Purs. And so a Pur is considered a house. And it's often depicted by a box that's broken at the bottom. And underneath that box is a symbol or a shape. And so there are generally 5 Purs. The first starts with the base of them all, which is Per Neter. And so it's a box with a staff and a flag on it, which is the Neter. And this is also the symbol for the pyramid. And so we're always told that the pyramid is a tomb, right? And so it's interesting that when you look at Per Neter means the house of energy, or where the Greeks got their word for nature, natura, right? So this comes from Neter. But to the Egyptologists and the people studying Egypt today, the Neters are the gods and the goddesses. But in reality, if you look at who they are and what they actually represent an aspect of nature. And so Neter, nature, right? This is where this word kind of falls into etymology in a sense. And so we have the Per Neter, which is the pyramid. It's not a tomb, it's a house of energy. And so we were talking off in the green room about, looking into some of these structures and seeing them as energy places. And so we'll get back into that in a second. So the second Per then is the Per Ka. And the Ka is your physical body. In the 7 souls, when you die, your body breaks into 7 souls. It actually breaks into 9, but there's 7 that are in particular. And one of them is the Ka, and that's your physical body. It's what you leave behind. And so a Per Ka is the house of the body. This is a tomb. Oh, were you going to say something? Sorry.
No.
Oh, okay. You're like,
I
"Oh, wait a
saw
second."
hand peek waving, so I was like, "Oh, my pinky! I'm gonna give a little pinky wave."
No worries. So the Per Ka is the tomb. So this is a tomb. This is the Mustaba and some of the tombs, Valley of the Kings, Valley of the Queens, where we actually find the tombs of the ancient kings and queens of Egypt. I'll get back to why we call them kings and queens. The third is the Per Ba. And so this is the house with a bird with the head of a human, or your head on top of it. And in the 7 soul extraction of your death, the Ba is your spirit, which is interesting because, I was saying Yaga Baba, or I can't remember her name, but out of Spirited Away, we have this same character representing herself at night. She turns into a bird with her head and flies off. So that's the Ba. This is the spirit. So it's the house of spirit. This is a temple. This is where you worship the spirit. The fourth is the Per Wer. And this is kind of controversial because Per Wer, Per Wizard, these are interchangeable words, but Wizar is also Osiris. This is, the Greeks took Bu Wizard and turned it into Osiris. And so Per Wer, or Per Wizard, is the house of knowledge, or the house of Osiris in a sense. And so this is a school or a house of learning or a hospital, so to speak. And it's often portrayed as the house with the stepping stone. And that's the symbol of that. And so the fifth is the most important, even though there's a sixth, and I can actually show this once we get into the slides. The fifth is Per Ah. And so this is the house of the woman, or the high house. And this is where the word pharaoh comes from. Don't mean to
I
blow
love
your
this
mind.
part. I love this part because it's like, can we get like? I want everyone to know this part.
There are no male pharaohs in ancient Egypt. Period. Hands down. End of story.
That's huge.
Per-Ah was the high house. One of the only remaining symbols of Per-Ah is on top of the temple of Hathor, but because they had somebody sadly fall off the roof in ancient past a few years ago, until recently they have not let people up onto the rooftop. But it's the house, and then it's like a triple diamond shape underneath it. I actually have a photo of it. I don't have it in front of me. It's not in my slideshow. I should have put it in it, but it's going to be in my lecture coming up in April. Anyway, and so Per-Ah is the house of the pharaoh. This is the high house of the woman. And in ancient Kem, pre-dynastic Egypt, Khemet was a matriarchy. And this is not to say that it was the opposite of a patriarchy where the women had all the power. It was a unity project. The women controlled and had power over the fertility of the land. The men had power and control over the people. And so together they controlled the energy of the people and the land. And in photos that I'll bring up, maybe we should kind of dive into that here in a minute.
All right, there you go.
So we'll get to this in a second. I'll come back to it. So here you have in the middle the matriarchy. You always have these sculptures of the woman with her arm around her man. And so this is super fascinating that we constantly see this throughout ancient Kemetian and Egyptian sculpture. This is the unity project. This is what I was talking about. And so it's really fascinating that this matriarchy existed, and the pharaoh was, the women hierarchy. And I actually chatted with Timothy Hogan, who's the Grand Master of the Knights Templar presently, and we were on a lecture together. And I asked him, I said, were there any male pharaohs, or was there a female hierarchy that would elect the kings? And he agreed. He's like, there were no male pharaohs, but the pharaonic order was either the priestesses of the Temple of Isis or the priestesses of the Temple of Hathor.
Mm-hmm.
And they were the ones that would initiate their king, and then the king would rule the land. And some historians are smart about this, and they say in the time of Pharaoh, there was King Tutmosis, or there was King Ramses, or there was King Akhenaten, but we get lazy and we just call them the pharaohs. And they weren't, because the pharaohs were never male. They were always the female component to the king, basically.
Hmm.
And so that to me has always been a fascinating aspect of the missing history of Egypt, because when the Greeks came in, they saw everything as patrilinear. Oh, it's king to son, king to prince. They didn't see it as a unity or a king to prince, queen to daughter, who's running what. And so this was happening for a while. Now, so what's interesting here is we have this beam of light at the Temple of Hathor that happens, once a day, and it goes.
And a lot of Coptic Egyptian in their churches, they always, like, a lot of them had like a beam of light that came down.
Of course. It's all over. You find this all over the temple.
And there's still, like, there was an attack earlier this year. Like Coptic Christian churches are being attacked to this day. Of course.
So Yeshua, came to us in one of many forms, because if you actually read the scriptures or any of this, he's mentioned in over a 250-year period. And he's a different form of Yeshua. He's never called Jesus, which is interesting. Jesus is Zeus, the son of Zeus. So in a sense, Coptic is very similar. It's the physical manifestation of the creator. So this would also be the son of the creator, or the son of Zeus. So there's a similarity there. And then Christ is a title. It's not a name. It means Christos, and Christos is the anointed one. And so this is one who's been anointed by the Almighty. And so there have been many Christos. And so this is interesting that the Coptics, as I was saying, predated Christ. He ended up in Egypt for several years, learning from the Coptics. You were mentioning the Coptics as well. What do you have to say on that?
Well,
Sorry.
I mean, my sister got a DNA test because I would never do such a thing, but we have Coptic Egyptian blood, and it's you don't hear too much about Coptic Egyptians, and they don't identify with being like Arab at all.
Not at all.
And they were even 5,000 years ago was a very small portion of the population. I want to say less than 10%, like 10% or 5%, and that was 5 or 6,000 years ago. So it's like what and the beliefs. I want to do a show about, maybe you would want to do it or come on. I want it about about Coptic Christianity, Coptic Egyptians, what they believed, and yeah, if you would be interested in that.
Oh, fully. That would be super fascinating. So this slide is really interesting, actually, coming back to it. So we have this beam of light that we were just talking about coming through the hand of the keeper of knowledge. And so he's sitting in front of the scribes, the books, right? And so the light and the knowledge, it goes directly diagonally through the books of knowledge. I always thought that was a fascinating one.
I always take that too, because I have visions and profound insight and wisdom that I get from looking into specific lights. And so for me, I'm gonna take that as well. I mean, it's so layered, but
very. And in the Dendera temple, the Temple of Hathor, there are different areas in the temple where if you're there at the right time of day, you have a beam of light that just shines down onto you on the floor, and you stand in it, and you're enlightened. It's an amazing thing. And so in the Temple of Seti, as you're heading up the final ramp to go up and over the top down to the Osirian temple, which was buried underground until recently, you have this weird, it's like the weirdest hieroglyph ever of this winged man. It's like, where does this come? It's the only place I've ever seen it in Egypt. It doesn't really exist. It doesn't exist anywhere else, to my knowledge. It's in the Temple of Seti I. And what is it depicting? Is this, a hang glider?
There he is right there.
And then you have this weird
ancient squirrel suit.
Seriously. I mean, seriously, very interesting. And then to the far right at the museum in Cairo, you have this really interesting box lid that has all these circular structures. And there's another one inside the temple as well. Actually, this is the one inside the temple. There's one outside of the temple that's like the relief of this. So it's all the concavity shapes. Anyway, just going to go back to the beginning. So that was kind of my introduction to chematology. There's a lot of symbols and shapes that transfer into English, because English is an amalgamation of multiple languages. The ampersand, for instance, that and symbol comes from Greek. It means
wait, I'm going to say this really quick because I have somebody on a project, and they're looking for somebody that speaks Coptic Ethiopian. So if anybody knows anyone that speaks Coptic Ethiopian, let me know. Reach out to me. I found somebody actually on my street that is Nubian. Might. Oh, really? Yeah.
There's a lot of Ethiopians in Portland, and yeah, I'll chat
Coptic
with them.
Ethiopian. Okay.
Yeah, interesting. So these are some of, I always like the photo anomalies. And so the question is, when did the Khamitian culture exist? So if you look at the Giza Plateau, we're shown that there are 3 pyramids. Well, actually, there's 9 pyramids if you look closely. There's all the smaller little mastabas that they've, thrown out there. And what's more curious is underneath the Giza Plateau are many series of tunnels. Whether they're bringing water in or pumping water out, they all go out into the Western Desert, as we were describing earlier, the Ur Nile. Some of these tunnels go 18 kilometers. Some of them go up to 50 kilometers. They go past Dendera, Saqqara, and all the way out. And so the question is, what are these tunnels for? They're the size of my office, or the interior of a semi-truck, basically that size frame. So what is that, 10 foot by 10 foot, or 2.5 cubits by 2.5 cubits, basically. And they go for kilometers or miles. And they're in the bedrock, and they're 10 layers deep. which technically means they're probably 20 to 24 layers deep, because you have to have a severe amount of bedrock between each tunnel system so they don't collapse in on each other. And when you're on the Giza Plateau and you look down some of what they call the testing pits, you see the pit goes down several hundred feet before there's sand, or there's sand abruptly automatically. And the question is, how far down do these tunnels go? Why are they called testing pits? Are they well shafts? Are they shafts that then add light to the water structure that's coming beneath? We know the water is underneath the Giza Plateau, because when you go into the Osiris shaft, I have photos coming up about that. You go down, it's 3 layers, but it's technically about 6 layers if you're to do the math of how far down you're going into the earth. And the furthest chamber down, there's 2 tunnels that go off in a north and south direction. And in the middle of the chamber is this giant green, I can't think of the name. I need to keep looking this back up. It comes out of Lebanon. It's a green granite stone, and it's all one solid piece of stone. And where is this?
How big is it? Do you have a picture of it?
I do, actually. There it is. Okay, it's in the upper left. So,
and is this found like throughout, or just in this
no,
one
this
area?
is a box. And so Zahi Hawass has a video of this where he's with, I believe it's NBC News. They pumped all the water out of this chamber. This water is like all fresh water. When I was there, Yusuf was tasting it, going, "Wow, this is cleaner than any of the Cairo water," because this is bedrock, underground water that's coming in here from different sources. And in the ancient times, it was much lower or it was much higher, depending. And so if you see in the center of this photo, there's like rubble. That used to be a pillar that had hieroglyphs on it. And there are 4 of them around this box. And the box is literally what you're looking at in the middle. You can see the diagonal line heading to the pillar. You can see where it's broken in the front, but there's a cavity beneath. This rock does not fit down the tunnel to the upper right, which is the shaft that goes down to this catacomb.
Okay.
And it does not fit down either of the upper right or the upper left tunnels physically.
Okay.
It might with an inch on both ends, but where are you putting people to move it? And this is the same conundrum that you find at the Serapeum. This first image here down in the lower right is going down the first 3 layers into the darkness. That's me looking up, taking the photo at the other. I was like the first person down. And then they flipped on the lights, and you can see to the right is the sketchiest ladder you ever want to go down in your life. And then to the left is the ladder that people go down today. So you go down like 3 layers to the first layer. And then you go down another ladder, which is the second one in the upper right. Or sorry, that's the third ladder. The first ladder is before the one in the lower right. You go down to this first catacomb area, which has 7 alcoves. Obviously, this was dug after the fact of setting up these, because what's digging down through the bedrock in both of these tunnels is not what was used to dig into those alcoves. It was like very different times. And there's burials there, although there has never been bodies found in any of them. One of them is a box that's black basalt, and it has this creosote on it. I don't have a photo here, sorry of it, but everybody was wondering, what is this black soot? And I'm like, that's exactly what it is. It's black soot because they used to burn fires in here. And so the soot would create itself as a creosote around this object, much like my samurai sword from the Nepali village that I have and other artifacts that I've seen. But you go down into this further chamber, this upper left spot, and you're mind blown. You're like, how is this massive box down here? What was in it? What was it used for? And so there are other spots like this on the Giza Plateau, such as going backward in time here. Sorry,
I think it's like a seed bank.
Yeah. So this is on the Giza Plateau. The structure on the left is the Valley Temple. So here you have massive, 1-ton limestone blocks. Some of these are granite, wrapping around corners where they've been cut. So it's almost like they form fit these and then cut them out while they were form fit. That's kind of an odd one. Right in front of the east side of the Great Pyramid, because the north is where the entrance is. So this is to the right, is this black basalt piece that looks like Wolverine came through and sliced his claws through it. This is super ancient. So who's cutting this? This is not, copper saws with sand. This is a power tool of sorts. Very obvious. And then the third element here is me and Stephen Mailer, who I went to Egypt and Peru with the first times. Looking at this box in the back of the Cairo Museum that a lot of people don't, they look at the front of it and they walk past it. They don't really look at it. But if you go around back, you can see where the saw slipped. And so if you look at where Stephen is with his hat and his chin, you can see the line coming to where the end of the saw mark is. And so the saw mark is going in diagonally, and the line is trying to form fit to the line in the foreground. And so actually this is two saw blade. It's one on top of the other coming together because there's another access point underneath. And it shows that the saw blade was moving so fast that it slipped. Well, if you were sawing this, slow motion with a copper saw and, sand, you would recognize that you were screwing up long before you made that kind of an indentation. That's like 4.5 feet right there, or a meter and a half between where you're looking at the front of this block all the way to where it ends. And then another 3 meters or 2 meters to where Stephen and I are standing. And so, these are ancient anomalies. How old are these civilizations? Because this screams technology that the dynastic Egyptians did not have. They did not have in their own scriptures. They did not have use of the wheel, and they did not have use of like the copper. The
Do you believe that though? You really believe they were they didn't have advanced stuff?
Oh, I believe they had advanced stuff, but I think it was much, much, much older. Because a lot of the stuff that we see these kind of markations on are not marked. They're not, laden with hieroglyphs, which brings us to, here's another great example in front of the Temple of Luxor. Christopher Dunn has been one that's, gone over this one several times. This head bust of Ramses II, if that's even who it is perfect. It's equilateral on both sides. My example is kind of a bit off, but if you line it up, it is so perfect. It's unbelievable. And there's no way the human hand could chisel this out in basalt or black granite that this is in without, diamond tools and a CNC machine. Because your ears are perfect, your eyes are perfect, the nose is perfect, the phylum, the mouth, everything is perfect symmetry on both sides, and this is impossible. We as humans cannot do this. Oh, but what about Michelangelo and the great sculptures that's in marble? It's a lot easier to work with, and if you look at Michelangelo, the best way to look at it is from beneath, because you do not see the imperfections. You see,
it's like thinking of imagine an AI 3D guided 3D crystal 3D
brilliant.
printer.
Yeah, brilliant. And that's kind of the idea. And Christopher Dunn, talked about a lot of this in the ancient times. And so right next to this, behind the head on the left, is this stele. And behind that are two sculptures. And I discovered this. A lot of people have never seen this. So the sculpture on the left is a sculpture of Horus. And if you look at the bottom of it, there are these two indentations and a massive crack mark that goes up and then all the way up the back and all the way up to the head. And so this means that in ancient times, this statue was sitting on its side and was broken. And they put filaments into these places to seal the cracks so that it would stay.
Wait, those two indentations. Wait, you're saying that was broken?
Yeah, you can see the crack.
No, but those two indentations right there.
No. That's what was dug into it
okay.
in ancient times, but after the fact that this statue was built. So this statue was found broken, The ancients, the dynastic or pre-dynastics, dug these, pitted holes into them and filled them with a metal or a cement of sorts to seal that crack so that the statue could remain together. If you look on the arm of the statue standing upright, you'll also see these two indentations, and the rest of the arm broke off. And so they were trying to preserve this statue in ancient times. So the question is, how old is the statue?
I love looking. See those symbols behind him? Like even in the back, I love seeing the things you never see photographed, like Tutankhamun, the back of Tutankhamun's head. I would love to see more of behind that statue.
There's a lot. Even the feet are but there's two levels. So the statue itself is a level of perfection that the hieroglyphs don't even match. They're good, but they don't match the perfection of the statue. And so this is two totally different time periods. And as we like to say, the hieroglyphs that we see on all these is the graffiti that was added after the fact. And there's a lot of examples of this. Ramses,
I'm sure I feel like when this stuff was built too, it was like more telepathy, like that there wasn't sound, like things didn't have to be written and like that, So if everyone was telepathic, you're gonna how you show that's gonna be different. Like it had to have come later, different symbols.
So, speaking of weird telepathy, so all over Egyptian, hieroglyphs and artifacts, we find these elongated skull people. So on the left is this giant that people are worshiping, and he's tilling the land, and he has an elongated skull. Interesting. And on the right is Akhenaten and Nefertiti and their three daughters. And all three of their daughters, the one is on the shoulder of Nefertiti. I don't know if you see her. And it's like two daughters and a son. Sorry, there are two daughters. There's Meritaten, and I can't remember the other one. Meritaten's fascinating because when Akhenaten's family was attacked by the Henote priests, she fled across the Mediterranean Sea. Mari is a title of water and love. So Marataten is Mare Aten, so it's the enlightenment of water. She crossed the water. She became known as who is Scotia, who conquered, or didn't conquer, but basically inhabited Scotland and became the deity of Scotland. It's interesting because in ancient Kem as well as ancient Polynesia, there is this deity known as Maui, and Maui unified Polynesia, much like Marataten or Scotia unified the English islands. Maui basically unified all of Polynesia from New Zealand all the way to Alaska, through Hawaii, Tahiti, Tonga, all that area, Easter Island. A lot of that during the last, we've had sea rise and sea fall, but there's evidence of Egyptian culture all the way to Peru and all the way up to Alaska. A lot of it is connected through different paddles and basically the obelisk becomes, and the obelisk adorned becomes the what do we call these in Native American culture? The totem pole, the totem, the obelisk are very similar. There's so many overlaps. There's a great series called Skeletons in the Cupboard. Where Did the Redheads Go? It's a 3 or 4 part documentary series about New Zealand. It talks a lot about this. But Maui was an Egyptian admiral about 2000 BC for the king of Egypt at that time. And he set out to sail to find new lands for ancient Kem or Egypt to inhabit or colonize. And he was known as Maui, and he was an admiral of the sea. And so this becomes this Polynesian god. And it's the same story with Scotia. Oh, she's this deity that came to Scotland and unified Scotland. And so it's interesting that this is from a very similar time period. So we have these elongated skulls. Are these ceremonial or are these legit? Because we also have these same elongated skulls in South America and Central America, in China, all over Asia. And when they started doing, or Brian Forrester, a good friend of mine, and L.A. Marzulli, and I think now Nassim Haramein is also doing some of the DNA testing on this. A lot of their haplogroup comes out of Azerbaijan, which is where a lot of the Maori and the Polynesians come from as well. So Is there a connection? Anyway. So this gets into the purs. This is the sixth pur. So this is the house of many houses. And this is my good friend Yusuf Iwan finding this at Tanis. And so it reads, from the land of Tawan or Tanis or Kem, there is a land of many houses, this is the house shape, this broken square that you get to by crossing 4 waters. Well, what are the 4 waters? Well, you have the Nile, you have the Mediterranean, you have the Atlantic, and you have the Amazon. And if you follow the Amazon through its course, you end up in Peru, the house of many houses. Or you can go the other direction. You know, the Mediterranean, the Red Sea, the Indian Ocean, Pacific Ocean, and there you're at the mouth of the Amazon on the Peruvian coast. And it's interesting, people are like, how is this even possible? When I went to Peru, our whole objective was to see if there was a ancient Kemetian or Egyptian connection there. And lo and behold, right there in the Larco Lima Gold Museum, in the basement, we have the 3 headdresses of Amun, which are straight out of Egypt. I mean, there's no way around this. I mean, even the chest plates. If you look at the lower left on the right hand side, you have the 3 headdresses, which you also have here. They all have different bases, and then they're all wearing these, chest plates and symbology. And so right here, and this is called, these are ancient Inca burial headdresses, and it's just like, no, I'm sorry. This is straight out of Egypt, folks. Like 100%. You look at it and you can't not see it. It's right there. And so the headdresses of Amun, because Amun is the hidden sun, it's duality. It's the black sun of brightness, and it's the dark sun of the hiddenness. And so this is the duality that we all face in our lives. We have a duality, all of us, male, female, darkness, light, yin, yang. This is all a duality point. And so this is what the ancient Kemetians were talking about. Also dealing with South America, on the right is this sculpture that's been re-embedded into the wall. You got to remember, a lot of the sites in Egypt were rebuilt by the Germans. So when people talk about the Temple of Isis at Philae Island, it actually was not on Philae Island. It was on an island in front of Philae Island. And they had to rebuild the entire temple when they decided to put in the Aswan Dam, which flooded the entire Nile. And so many sites have been moved. Abu Simbel was a cave system, and many temples inside of a cave system into the bedrock. They had to remove all of that and took all the sculptures and moved the sculptures above the dam, and then rebuild a cave that only goes back like 100 feet. So what's in those caves underneath the dam? None of us will ever know. And they did this all up and down the Nile when they dammed it, and God damn it, they damned it. Anyway, so on the right is this character. We see him in a couple of places. So this headdress is not part of ancient Kemetian headdress. This is a headdress of feathers. So this is the feathered serpent. We see this a lot in Mayan and Aztec headdress as well. These feathers or a specific type of plant. And so Maya is a word that means water. It doesn't mean pure water, but it means water in the Suf Kemetian language. And so
what means pure water?
Azgat Nefer. So okay. Nefer is
like Nefertiti.
Pure. Yeah. And Azgat is water. So when you ask for water, when you're in Egypt, you say, Azgat. And they'll laugh because they know exactly what you're talking about. Maya is also a name for water. And Mari is also a name for the love of water, in a sense. It's a title. And Mari is where we get the word for mermaid, maritime, the water, the holy water. All these come from the word Mari or mer. So there's a lot of etymology behind these words. So this character of Maya comes to Egypt, becomes a Kemetian or Egyptian, like in Rome do as the Romans. And there's a temple outside of Cairo that if you go into, you don't really notice things, but when you look up at the ceiling, you see what you see on the left. So these are not Cometian or Egyptian glyphs. These are Mayan, ancient Mayan glyphs.
Mm.
They have been looked at by Mayan elders and confirmed that this is an older language, a glyphic language of the Mayan. And it's interesting because we're told the Inca had no written language, but they also have a very similar language like this woven into the patterns of their fabric. Not
like
only
a Semitic, it's like a
Yeah.
Semitic language by looking at it. Yeah.
So not only did they have the Kipo, but they also had this glyphic language. Anyway, and if you notice all these glyphs, they look similar, but they're all different. They all have different aspects to them. So anyway, moving on. Great Pyramid. So this should have been at the end of the expedition, but the Great Pyramid is an interesting site. If you look at it on the right time of year from above, like all the pyramids on the Giza Plateau, all three of them, they all have 8 sides. Most people only see the 8 sides on the Great Pyramid, but in the actual photo that all these 8 sides are shown, all 3 pyramids show 8 sides. And so it's fascinating. That's an aspect. And the question is, was that to hold up the outer casing stones? Yes. It would allow the weight of the casing stones to sit on top of the outer pyramid, but it's also a radio telescope. It's how we design them today. We design them in these 8 facets as a canonical shape. And as we know from the King's Chamber, the shaft points to Sirius, and from the Queen's Chamber, it points to Osiris. And so this is key because Osiris points to Sirius. And so we have these 2 aspects. Where I'm standing in this photo on the right, literally to the right of me is where the shaft goes up. Oh, actually, sorry. Yeah, to the right of me. I'm actually standing in front of the box. So the picture of me in the upper left is me standing behind the box, and then I'm in the box. And so what's interesting in this room, you can see all the orbs. I mean, there's a lot of dust in there. There's also a lot of orb particles.
Mm-hmm.
You can tone in this room, and you reach it's like E flat or something to this level. But when you get in the box, it's an F, and so it's a different resonance or harmony on your body. And the box it's like 1x3 cubit. There's like a specific shape to it. You can't really see, you can kind of see it, but there's a scar that goes all the way around it through the upper part. That's when they tried to blow it apart with dynamite. They thought something was in it, even though there was never a lid on it. So the question is, why did they try to blow it apart with dynamite? They've dug this room up. The different corners of this room have been dug up, but this is part of the inner structure of the Great Pyramid, and it's all rose granite that comes out of the Aswan quarry. If you can see on the left-hand side.
What'd you say? Say that again about the
all of the King's Chamber, the not ascending passageway.
All this granite comes out of where the Isis temple was?
No, Aswan. Yeah, near Isis temple, correct.
Interesting.
Which is 500 plus miles to the south. And when they dredged the Nile River, they didn't find any granite slabs sitting at the bottom of the river, which means that none of the granite that they moved out of the quarry, which is another question in its own, ever spilled over into the river. So how did they move it? Because in modern times, we've lost a lot of these artifacts because we didn't have the buoyancy on the crafts to deal with the weight. Each one of these slabs in this room is like 70, 80 to 100 tons. So a ton is 2,000 pounds. If a human being can at max lift about 200 pounds, give or take, unless you're a super bodybuilder, you need, what is that, 100 people or 200 people to move a ton. So 70, 80 tons, you're going to need 1,000 people plus, to move this kind of weight. And then you have these structures at Baalbek, which are 100 tons. And in the Serapeum, you have boxes that are 100 to 150 tons, and you have no place in the Serapeum to put people. So it just beggars the question, how on earth were they moving these stones? The outside of the pyramid is all limestone, but they're still, 1 to 2 ton blocks of limestone, and you're piling them on top of each other. How are you piling them on top of each other? Anyway, here we are doing illegal things in the pyramid. We're chanting. We have a blood sacrifice. The gentleman on the left split his head open, sadly, going into the pyramid or into the king's chamber, because there's an alcove where
the guy in the blue right there.
Yeah, you're like scrape. You can see the blood in front of him. It was super sad that he split his head open, but he was so excited to even be there. When you're going into the Great Pyramid from the Grand Gallery,
you're like, this is the offering. Thanks, man.
To his left is the tunnel that comes in from the Grand Gallery. It comes in about 10 feet, and then there's an alcove that moves up, and then it goes another 10 feet. And so you're crunching down, and you can't really see in front of you because it's pitch black. So your head is scraping along this, the top of this tunnel, and then all of a sudden there's no tunnel, and so your head bobs up, and instantly you hit the next tunnel, and it's like razor sharp, and he hit himself pretty damn hard. So we're chanting. We had a blood sacrifice.
So what did the energy feel like? Because I know you and I have discussed the granite and how that amplifies things.
When you're in the king's chamber, even with this many people, you don't feel like you're on Earth. You feel like you're drifting through space.
How did your body feel? Like
that's what it feels like. You don't feel the world around you. You only feel this room.
Ooh.
It's weird. And when you're in the box, you only feel the box. You don't feel the rest of the room.
Does it ever feel when you're beneath any of these places like panicky? Because like, oh my gosh, like I can't hear my heartbeat, or I hear my heartbeat too intensely. Like, do you ever feel panic? Because some people talk about a certain, like, they go there and they pick up on a darkness, or it felt like a cold nuclear factory. Like they thought it was going to be spiritual, but they felt like a industrialized.
It's very obvious that this was industrial. It's so obvious. Yeah, we put stairs and ladders and railways in it, but it's very obvious that this was meant to be meant as a different function. And so, to answer your question, having been there twice, the first time I explored the whole pyramid, and both times, fortunately, I was one of the first people into the subterranean chamber. When you're on a tour, if you go by yourself, you pay it's like $200 to $300, and they only let you in the king's chamber. Obviously, you go through the Grand Gallery to get there. But underneath the Grand Gallery is the entrance to the Queen's Chamber. Queens, kings, nobody's ever been found in these chambers, but that's what they named them. But they never open that up on general tours, and they don't open up. To the left of that is the subterranean passageway, which goes down. It's like 500 feet into the ground. I mean, it's crazy how far it goes. I mean, it takes a while to go down. It takes even longer to come up because you get really claustrophobic because you're in it's a space that's like a meter by a meter. It's not very large. It might be 4 foot by 4 foot at max. And so anyway, the first time I was there, I went into the Queen's Chamber. I was very fascinated by it, but they had a lot of it sectioned off because they were doing the muon detection. And so they had all the muon recording devices, these plates that would record muon. We were talking about this on the last show.
Like a little ping pong table.
Yeah, they were recording these muons that would come through the structure. And if there was a cavity above where they were at, it could tell based on the speed it would hit the plate. And they could actually tell where that cavity was. I'm not entirely sure how.
Who was testing it? Who was overseeing it?
It was a Japanese company that was doing this.
Ooh.
Yeah, they did this in many of the pyramids. And this is how they detected that there's now this ring structure around the backside of the pyramid and another chamber that mimics the Grand Gallery, almost the same size above it. And there's another chamber off to the east side.
So they gave their results of their findings.
Yes.
They released them. I want to look into that.
Oh, it's super fascinating. But when I was in the Queen's Chamber in 2016, that was most of the chamber was cordoned off because they had their muon detectors. So I got bored with that. And the second they opened the subterranean shaft, I went down. and you go down and down and down and down and down into the darkness, and it's kind of crazy. It's like you're going down 500 feet vertically, but the shaft is much longer horizontally because you're at a diagonal angle. And you get down to the subterranean, and you're in this room that's about the size of a basketball court. There's two pillar sections in the south side of the room that look like water have washed through them and have created conduits or corridors, or they've been cut so that water going through them would create different vibrations. And in the middle of the room is a well shaft. They say there's nothing there, but if you look down it, it goes down 3 layers, and you can see that it goes off into tunnels. Come on, tell us there's nothing down there. Of course there is. And then to the eastern side of the room is what they call the dead-end shaft. And that is literally 1 meter by 1 meter. It's all solid bedrock. You're cut out of the bedrock the whole way through it. The entire ceiling is salt crystals that people have carved their names into. And then you get to the end of the dead-end shaft, and it's a cemented wall with a hole drilled through it. So it's obviously not.
Somebody in the chat said, now in 5,000 years, the scientists are going to point to the remains of that guy right there, his blood, and claim there's a human sacrifice.
It's on the floor of the grave. Sorry, brother. Anyway, moving on. That's the Osiris. This is, so.
And then Dub Selector said, remember when Zahi says the hidden chamber could be the resting place of Khufu, which indirectly admits that the box is not his sarcophagus.
Well, okay, so Khufu is an interesting thing. And even Zachariah Sitchin pointed this out early on when he went up into the relieving chambers above the king's chamber. The name of Khufu is misspelled. And so did Vice forge this name to give it an era? Yeah, we think so. We do. It could be much older. But what about the red ochre script in the Queen's Chamber shaft and the piece of wood that was found in it and the block hole that was covered over? Well, the piece of wood could have been somebody trying to poke up in there to see how far the shaft goes and lost the piece of wood. And the block that was covered over could have been covered over in more recent times. We don't know. We can't date granite. We don't really know how old these are. The symbols, however, in the Queen's Chamber shafts are not Khamitian or Egyptian. They're actually very related to old Romani script, which opens a whole nother can of worms.
Yes. Romani script.
Like pre Romani script, like from Romania, like Taltosh hieroglyphic script that's like super ancient. And so this is the question. Okay.
I wonder if it's like Vinca, like how much it's like
Vinca, yeah, correct. Thank you. I'm trying to remember. Johnny Enoch and I had an amazing conversation about this. So here I am in the upper left, looking down the shaft that's in the lower left. On the right is a shaft that's a little further to the south of this. But in the middle is a depiction of what was discovered down the shaft on the lower left in ancient times. Very similar to what we see in the Osiris shaft. Mm. And if you look at where this shaft is going down from, that's the third mastaba, or the third small pyramid in front of the Great Pyramid. Where I am standing looking down this shaft with Muhammad and a couple of people from my tour is literally in front of that third smaller pyramid. That's literally where this shaft is that I'm looking down on the left. On the right, that's further, that's by the third one to the left, closer to the Sphinx. So the question is, what's down these shafts? You know, how far down do they go? I've been down.
And it's connected to other sites like in Iraq and in Romania. I mean, they go far. Just that they all lead to each other.
Yeah, no, I could only imagine. We have shafts like that across the United States, tunnel systems that go for hundreds or not thousands of miles. And so the question is, again, okay, what is the box for? Is this a sarcophagus? Probably not. Why would you do this? Number two, why has this never been, reported outside of, well, here we have a shaft. It's now covered, up to a certain level with sand, because that's what happens over time in the desert and wind and garbage and whatnot. And we have something very similar to the Osiris shaft. I mean, very similar, right on the other side of the Sphinx. So again, it beggars the question. And the Sphinx itself, I have a friend, won't mention his name so he doesn't get in trouble, but he went down the tunnel in the back, the rump of the Sphinx when we were there. He pulled aside the grid and went down and snapped photos. And there's a tunnel system that goes off to the west, so toward the rump of the Sphinx, it keeps going. And there's another one that goes up inside of the Sphinx. So is there a system of tunnels and rooms inside of the Sphinx? Most likely. In front of the Sphinx paws is now a boarded section, but in ancient times there was a stairwell that went down underneath the dream stele. And the dream stele is interesting because it says that Khufu and his relatives showed up and restored this site. They didn't build it. It says it right there on the stele. But unless you're paying good money to go down there, you'll never see this as a tourist. And so, the Egyptologists still have a domain on hiding this knowledge, but it's right there.
I feel like it has one of those things that like I came across in Romania where you can access like everything about yourself, which is
sorry, where's this?
Remember in Romania, but that crystalline technology that is able to show you and read you. I feel like I haven't come across it in Egypt, but I bet you there. I just feel like there is one.
Would not surprise. I mean, all these structures are crystals. I mean, the pyramid is a giant crystal. You have limestone rock, which acts. If you ever watch those videos with Yusuf and Ben from Uncharted X, Yusuf has a electrical pillar that he puts different rings of stone on top of, and then he'll put an electrical device to it and shows which one conduct electricity. Granite does not conduct electricity. Limestone does. And so you have a capacitor. You have a capacitor. You have an electrical and a capacitor holding that, because we know that granite will hold the charge. It just won't conduct the charge. And if granite is put under pressure of weight, it will create a piezoelectric effect. And so, I mean, this is fascinating because a lot of people, I believe, including
and you add the pressure of water to that.
Oh, bingo, yeah. You have maybe even a ram pump technology where the pressure of the water coming through these tunnels under these structures is able to be pumped up through these structures. Hydrogen can then be extracted. Chris Dunn was talking about this in the Giza power plant. And you have a piezoelectric effect sparking the hydrogen. These pyramids are going to create a euphoric energy that goes across a vast amount of space that's going to allow fertility of both humanity and landmass, which is literally what you see around the Nile.
Like steam power being like an ancient nuclear energy.
Kind of, yeah, or geomancy in a sense. Let's get on to some of these other slides. Why? Oh, that's the end of the slides. Okay, so this is at the I wish I had a picture of the outside of this box. This is at the Serapeum. So you go down into the bedrock. It's either Dendera or Saqqara. Don't remember which one. You go down into the bedrock, and there's one tunnel that goes off. There's a main tunnel that connects to another tunnel that goes off. There's a locked door that connects to a third tunnel. And there's probably 4 or 5 other tunnels that we haven't discovered. Through one of the alcoves, there's another tunnel that goes up with an up ramp. But when you go down into the main structure and you turn left, there's a box that's like 15 by 15 foot sitting in the middle of the hallway as if it was just left there. Black diorite, this is perfect diorite, which is a type of granite, very, very, very hard, like 7, 8 on the Mohs scale. Diamond is 10, corundum, ruby is a 9. And so you're going to need something incredibly powerful to cut this, not sand and copper saws or bashing stones. And there are 24 alcoves that we know of currently, and each one of these have a north, south, east, west alignment. The box in the middle of the hallway, you can fit a person and a half around it on the side, which beggars the question, this weighs 70 tons. How in the hell did they move it down into the bedrock? It doesn't fit down the tunnel that you come down. It might fit down the other tunnel, but it's off limits. I snuck back there and looked up it, and it's wide enough, but the question is, where does it go? And it's just sitting in the middle of this tunnel that's like several feet above the lower tunnels, and it's abandoned. And again, this is 70 tons. So you have this underground structure that was cut out of the bedrock. There's no soot, so they weren't using torches or anything like this. Miners today will get what they call miner's lung because the particulate mass of the underground drilling structure creates a dust that they're inhaling, and it rips their lungs apart like asbestos would do today, in a sense. And so there's no evidence of this. There's no evidence of soot. So how are they hauling out this interior structure, these hallways, and then these alcoves? And in the alcoves are these black granite boxes. As you can see, it's 4 foot by they're equilateral, so it'd be like 4 foot by 8 foot interior, but probably 6 foot by 12 foot exterior because the walls are a little over a foot wide. Solid, perfect diorite. Okay. As you can see, my reflection on the ceiling of the inside of this box, these are perfectly polished, and as you can see by the laser, they're perfectly angled. How are they doing this? This is a solid piece of stone, except for the lid, which is cut off the bottom, which I showed you in the Cairo Museums how they were doing a lot of these boxes. The picture on the left is the chicken scratch graffiti on the outside of the box, which was clearly not done by the person or time period when the box was actually made. These boxes sit 4 to 5 feet below the main level of the alcove or the pathways. They're in all these alcoves. They sit down 4 to 5 feet. So the question is, how did they get them down into these alcoves, cut and dress them? Because as we think by the box at the front entrance, these were cut, polished, and smooth after they were brought into the space. And at the back of all these alcoves is a archway. And so the question is, was there other stuff in these alcoves that we don't know about? There's 24 of these. They dynamited a few of them. Nothing has ever been found in them, but they allotted this site to the Apis Bowl because they found near the vicinity the mummified remains of an Apis bull or a Brahma bull, basically. And so this is where the Seraph bull, the Apis, it's the same Greek or language. And there's more than 24 of these, and they all are north, south, east, west. Why would you make a box like this? It's perfectly alchemically sealed or hermetically sealed. Would you use a structure like this as a seed vault?
I don't know. I feel like if you made a certain monatomic
even that. Oh my God,
to store it in that of such high regard, because it's really
that's the question of the seed vault or a monatomic vault. Yeah, you're spot on with that. Why would you create a structure that has perfect alignment to magnetic poles? So you have an electromagnetic structure in a sense, right? It's hermetic.
Yeah, I would think because of the ingredients involved and how important it is to keep it at a certain, a certain tone in a certain environment would be because of the different metals and mineral, that are in it. So I feel like seeds are important too, but I would feel like it'd be some type of powder substance formula.
Interesting. Thank you. That's actually a different way of looking at it. I've never actually considered that. However, nothing has been found in any of them. And so this is where the question is, A, how old are these structures? Were they looted? Were they abandoned? Don't know. But it's very clear that the graffiti on the outside and the actual structure of the box on the insides and outsides are perfect, but the graffiti is like chicken scratch.
So what about the Mars connection?
Well, this is interesting because this whole band of brothers, which is this whole region from Giza, further north of Giza, all the way down through Dendera and Saqqara, it's this band of life along the Nile River, all the way over to Israel, was known as this area of Cydonia, where Giza was part of Cydonia. Well, this is interesting because on Mars, when the Viking 1 and 2 expeditions went to Mars in 1975 and 1977, they photographed this northern region of Mars that they nicknamed or dubbed Cydonia. Why? Because, man, they found pyramids, the DMN pyramid. There's like multiple pyramids. There's what looks to be an abandoned city, and then off at the distance is a face, or what was thought to be a face based on the different photos or photo structures from Mars. Mission to Mars kind of elaborated on this, a Disney movie. Oh, wow, there is a face on Mars. But when NASA went back there in the recent past with the their NASA observer, the Mars observer, VLRO, I can't remember the exact name of it, but it's a satellite that is continually in orbit. It's how we communicate now with all of our rovers on Mars. When they took photos of this area, they deliberately blurred it out to look like what they call the cat box. And so the face on Mars all of a sudden became this cat scratch box, and everybody's like, oh, nothing to see here. But there are no real good photos now of any of the pyramid structures or the city. And it's fascinating. This area of Mars is called Cydonia, which is the same area of Earth around all these pyramid structures, all the way to the Bent Pyramid, the Red Pyramid, the Step Pyramid, the Maidon Pyramid, the Pyramid of Unas, Abu Sir, the Buried Pyramid, which is now under.
Does anyone have any theories about like the pyramid being connected to Mars and the way it would emit something and it affecting, like, does anyone ever?
In the Vedas, they talk about this. So they talk about when the sun burst out in the last sun explosion, the humans built great arcs, vimanas, and they traveled to the fourth realm from the sun. What's the fourth realm from the sun? Mars. And they called it Mahar, and they went there for thousands of years. And because the gravity was different, they became pale of skin. They had red auburn hair and blue-green eyes when they came back to Earth, thinking that, oh, well, we left the primitive humans on Earth. They all should have died out during the last solar cataclysm, but they didn't. And so the sons and daughters that had stayed to protect the Earthlings became the demigods. This is Krishna and Shiva and, all these Rama, all these characters that had, the advanced technology. And when the gods came back, this is where the great war of the land happened, the Mahabharata, which means the war of the land. And here come these gods from space and their vimanas fighting the gods or demigods on Earth, protecting the humans in their vimanas, having literally what is described as laser and nuclear wars, using automatons and laser-guided weaponry and smart tech and all the stuff that we see today, but 40, 50, 400,000 years ago, depending on what astrological aspect of the Vedas you want to look at. It's right there. And so we have this weird connection with Mars as a way station, for several thousands of years for humanity. And so why are we continually sending, probes and robots there, or are we? This is a really interesting question. A lot of the photos coming back from especially Curiosity and the new mission with the helicopter are showing objects out of size and out of place, but are also showing organic artifacts that could be found here on Earth. Anything you want to say about that?
Oh, I know. I'm my video, like I made a video about it, of just really questioning it, of like, what if they're not going to Mars? What if what they're showing us is Mars is here? And looking into the money too, of like, well,
How much?
what if they are going there and they're not releasing any of the data? They could be going there. And what if the form of travel that they're getting there is more like a, portal technology? And so just questioning that, and even like all the things that NASA has been caught faking and falsifying what they're doing. Why? So where is all this funding going? Why are they using Hollywood technology on something that they're being like, that so much money is literally supposed to be for? So then my question is, what are they using the money on? Well,
Okay.
one could argue, well, they're using money on, setting up operations in these planets, and they can't show you what type of operation, so they're not going to show you. That's why they have to falsify it. I mean, there's so many different ways you can read that. But the whole, how much money, they're even asking for in 2024, NASA's literally looking in 2024 for $27 billion. And what's his name? Phil Schneider has come out and talked about that's around the price that it costs for like an underground base, like to create like an underground military base.
Well, who's a private subcontractor of NASA right now is the Boring Company, Tesla, SpaceX, right?
Mm-hmm.
What does the Boring Company do? Well, they build underground tunnels. And if we had the super lift technology to get one of these devices off Earth, we could build underground tunnels and bases on the moon and Mars and on asteroids. And so,
there's a lot of it is like, look up here, when it's like, not the what's beneath our feet, of like, look over here, but like, we're digging and creating these things that you're interested in us doing on Mars, we're doing here, but we're not showing any of that, and nobody's that curious about it either.
Under LA, right? What did they do under Seattle? They rebuilt the water aquifer under Seattle. And so it's like, what is this technology capable of? All this heavy lift exploding rockets from SpaceX, this is distraction. Oh, we're trying our hardest. We're trying to build these rockets that are going to go to the moon and Mars and beyond. And in reality, I think there's a whole different technology being used. And this is a subdiversion of that. I'm in the camp, we went to the moon, but what we were shown was not legit. It was altered photos, or, a Hollywood prop of sorts, but we definitely have been there. And some of the footage is interestingly real. So when you watch the LEM, the Lunar Excursion Module, leaving the surface of the moon in Apollo 15 footage, you see it sitting on the platform, and then it lifts off as if it's on ropes. Okay, if the moon is 1/6 or 1/5 the Earth's gravity, we would still need a rocket system able to propel us off of 1/5 of the Earth's gravity. So if the Saturn rocket can get us off of Earth toward the moon, what's going to get us off the moon back into orbit to meet up with the return module, and so on and so forth? We're going to need a lot more than a little firecracker and a bloop, which kind of implies that maybe we're reusing alternative technology. But then it beggars the question, why have we not gone back in 50 years?
Especially if they want us to believe that's how they got there, right?
If we were at the height of our technology, and every year it was getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper to do this, why would we not go back? There are so many resources on the moon we could use here on Earth. If you've ever seen the movie Moon with, God, why can't I think of his name? Brilliant movie.
Wait, didn't we gift to Russia like it was supposed to be a artifact like from the moon, and Holland. It turned out to be petrified wood? What?
It was Holland. So the NASA astronauts came back, and they gave the leader of Holland, or the ambassador to Holland to the United States, a moon rock, and they finally tested it after many years. It's sitting in the Amsterdam Museum, and it turned out to be petrified wood from Antarctica, which should raise even more questions, because a lot of the
Clue.
meteorites and whatnot that they claim were from Mars or from the moon all came out of Antarctica. So, speaking of cross culture again, this Maya character ending up in Egypt, and Mayan glyphs all over Egypt. On the right is this Mayan glyph of it's actually Olmec. Can't think of the character, but he's holding the bag and he's inside of a serpent. And on the left is at the Temple of Isis, buried in a corner in the middle of nowhere. And it's literally the same person holding a stick and a bag inside of the serpent.
It's at the Temple of Isis?
Yeah, the one on the left. It's like buried way in the back, like down a sub-column. Thank you, JJ, for finding this. She was the one that found this with Hugh Newman and I.
Wait, and that is where?
That's in Egypt. The one on the right is in Guatemala.
Oh, okay. Because I was okay. I get it now.
They're almost the same. I mean, it's this deity, holding devices inside of the serpent, and the one on the right is the same.
Do you know how many times I've had intense, like deep sessions of visions, and I'm shown something very, very similar to that? Mine's a little different, but it's pretty close.
So this is the famous Aswan Quarry. My shoes melted the first time I came here because you're standing on red or pink.
What time of year were you there when that happened?
April. It was like 120 degrees.
Ooh.
Yeah. Plus in the quarry. The upper, the left photo is the unfinished obelisk. You can see where the crack is. And you see these scoop marks going down this whole channel. We're told in the museum that this was all done with bashing stones, as you see my friend in the middle trying to work this huge piece of stone.
Remember when I brought up, like, imagine like these drone lasers, like coming in and like printing it through, These
look more like deliberate scoop marks. And so on the far right, okay, so in the middle, on the bottom, is what they call a testing pit. So they're trying to tell us that somebody dug this out with bashing stones, and it's like 15 to 20 feet deep. You can see the size of my foot next to it. How in the hell are you bashing this out with bashing stones? Please tell me. 15 feet deep. You're not. You're using technology. I'm sorry. You just are. There's no way you're getting that smooth of a curvature that goes down that deep to test the granite at that level.
But I would think it'd be something, I don't know, that the reason I'm bringing up the drone thing is the way, like, it doesn't look completely straight in edge. I don't know. It would just seem like it'd be something from the air.
It isn't. That's the question. But then on the right is the second unfinished obelisk. So if you look at the picture on the left and you go up and over the hill toward that tower, there's another unfinished obelisk, which is the one on the right. And you can see the scoop marks because you can actually go down into this. And it's like some sort of scoop comes down and up and then pulls the material out. And it's about 1 meter wide each time. So this is a massive piece of equipment that's carving this out. This is not slaves bashing with bashing balls. That stone that my friend Jason is trying to bash, the bashing ball, the diorite ball into the granite stone, has been there for 100 years and less than an inch of it has been removed. So this is not how they're doing this. I'm sorry, it just isn't. And when you watch the video in the museum, Zahi Was is like, they were slaves and we fed them beer and bread. Sure you did. You want slaves to be working on 1,000-ton pieces of rock. Yeah, good luck. And so in the video, they're digging it out underneath to where they get to a little tiny piece, and then they break it off and move it up. Well, there's a problem with that because you would have to remove that entire wall and the wall that I'm standing on top of, okay, in order to move this to the quarry or to the river to get it on a boat. You would have to remove all of this material in order to get it onto a boat if you were to move it across land, unless you had the ability to lift it up, over, and down. And again, you're putting it on a barge of some sort, and there's no evidence that any of these blocks fell off into the river when they dredged it. The lower right here is actually the underscoop of that last piece. So what is making this? This is a machine, and it's moving at very, very, very high speeds, because we're talking, pink granite. Diamond will cut this, and that's about it. uh, Especially with that, smooth detail and that kind of cut. You're using some sort of diamond bladed scoop. I mean, there's no other way to do this. Even hardened metal, there's no way to do this that we know of. That this isn't laser, obviously, and this isn't somebody using a bashing ball, as we see there. This is the famous Osirian. I've been here a couple times now. I've been able to go into some of the tunnels that go off of this. This was completely buried.
There's that one famous.
It's like, this was done with laser, and it's like, if you notice in this photo, there's more than 3 of these. These weren't done with laser; they were done with a compass and ochre, red ochre. And there's other evidence of this. But this whole site was buried under the ground. You can see where the desert came up to it, and it was completely buried in the upper portion of that. And then it's these massive granite columns that weigh 70 tons a piece. Again, who's building this and then burying it? It's like, this is not pre-dynastic Egypt. This is interesting. It's before it, and you find evidence of this in the Nubian Museum outside of Aswan. Nubians are very related to the Ethiopians and Sudanese. Also a matriarchy culture, very interesting. But in the Nubian Museum, you have vases made out of corundum, which is ruby. These bowls and these vases that literally are dated to sites that actually you can carbon date to 14,000 BC. So again, how old are these sites? Because pre-dynastic Egyptians did not have the ability to make this. And all of this is slotted within the last 5,000 years, which, I'm sorry, is impossible, just impossible. This is the famous site at the Dendera Temple in the ceiling. It's known as the black spot. You really can't see it unless you zoom in with a camera, which I did, and took a photo of it. I can't remember the name of the deity. It's a snake-headed deity, not quite like the one on the left, but has a specific meaning. And the question is, why did they not clean this one spot?
And then representative of the parasites inside of you.
To the right is Jehuti, which is the baboon, and Jehuti and Thoth or Tut are the same. They're both representation of knowledge, because the baboon and the what is Jehuti? It's the stork or the heron are very matrilineal characters, and they always look after their people or their tribe. Mm. And they always share the knowledge, and this is why Jehuti and Tut or Thoth were characterized as this. But this is clearly, Jehuti right here on the right. Let's bring this back to the beginning. So here we are in the Dendera Temple in the basement.
That's carved out of what?
This is in black diorite. Perfect diorite. Yep. So this is a form of granite. So this is known as the Dendera light bulb. On the left, there's 2 of them that connect. It's like a lotus flower and a light bulb with a snake in the middle of it. And on the other side of the wall is the one on the right. And this is in a chamber that's literally 3 feet wide.
What if that means wormhole?
It's really hard to get a photo of this, but you have this character who's a frog-headed character holding the duality. So he's directing the energy with these 2 pie scrapers that look like, which is interesting because you don't have that on the one across the way from it. And there's actually another place in this temple where there's another depiction of this. And so when people say, oh, the Dendera light bulb, it's just like, which one? There's like 6 of them. And it's interesting that they all sit on a Jed pillar, and the Jed pillar was the pillar of life. And so the snake, represents a certain aspect of the Kundalini energy or the fluid energy. There's 7, crooks in the snake. So here you have, the 7 chakras. They're all within the lotus is the crown chakra. I mean, there's a lot of symbology in this shape and what it's representing, but none of us know, and so it's always depicted as, oh, it's the Dendera light bulb. So this is the top of this. Actually, all of this except the centerpiece is from Elephantine Island. This is the box that's just littered in the middle of a junkyard. As you can see in the middle upper piece, it's all like perfectly carved. The curvature on the right is the inner lip. It's perfectly carved. The corner on the left is the inner corners. There's a slight curvature, as Christopher Dunn points out, but it's perfectly carved. And you kind of see the same in the lower right as well, where the sand is kind of eating up the right-hand side of the box. But again, it's perfectly carved. On one of the back walls is this symbol of the foot and the jug spilling water. So this is Asgat Nefer. This is the harmony of water. And this is where purified and structured water, we were talking earlier, comes into it. Where Maya is the term overall for water, and Mari is a title of the water bearer, or the love of water, in a sense. And so these are where all these different names come from. I believe the centerpiece is from, it could actually be from Elephantine Island, but I think this is from the Ramesseum temple. And if you look at the striations, they're all perfect, going down around the side of this piece. And that's not attainable through the human hand. So anyway, yeah, we're at the end of the slide deck. Guess you took off for a moment there. I could talk a little bit more about ancient chem and all of this. There's so much there that we don't know. Obviously, Egyptology is hiding a lot of it. It's interesting that Zahi Hawass and Mike Lehner were both scholared by the ARE, which was the Edgar Cayce Foundation. Edgar Cayce was notorious for channeling a lot of stuff about ancient Egypt and ancient Kemet and ancient Atlantis. He prophesized that there were tunnels underneath the Great Sphinx, which we have found. They definitely exist. And including under the left or right paw, Robert Schoch and his team did a hammer experiment where they shot a pellet down a couple feet into the earth, and then did a seismic report of that, and they found chambers underneath both paws in the central part of the Sphinx, which I was talking about earlier. There's now a boardwalk that stands over the front of the Sphinx, which we believe is a tunnel system that goes down underneath. So was there a Hall of Records? Don't know. It's interesting that Zahi Hawass and Mike Leonard are totally stuck on the Egyptology model. They do not stray from it, but they got all their money from the ARE, which is interesting because the ARE is all about, the quest for Atlantis and ancient tech and ancient technology. And so if you're taking all your money from this, your foundation, but you're telling a completely different story, things don't add up.
I love that you're bringing up the excavation that they did, that he allowed.
I was bringing up Zahi Hawass and how he's related to the ARE. He was funded. He went to college on an ARE grant, and here he is, the Grand Master of Egyptology, and he denies that there was a pre-existing civilization. He denies all of it, but his funding comes directly from the ARE, and so you've got to question why is he hiding this information? Same with Mark Leonard. They both were ARE graduates, and this was the foundation and scholarship that Edgar Cayce Foundation set up. And as we know, Edgar Cayce predicted so much about Atlantis and Mars and Egypt, and he was the sleeping prophet. And a lot of what he came down with has come to pass. He was one of those early savants to predict it. He was in a sense like you, a remote viewer, right? In a lot of sense. And so, yeah, I mean, again, what is the connection to Mars in Egypt? Why? So Cairo in I don't know if I brought this up earlier, but Cairo in the not Cometian, but the Arabic language was Karim al Muay, which means Mars. It's like, why would they name Cairo Mars? And they're naming it after Ares, the god of war. That's what Mars was. But where does the word Mars come from? It's really an interesting question. Ares, same thing. Here's this god of war, and if you look into Mars, there's this exploded planet hypothesis. Getting deep into the weeds here, but we had Marduk and Tiamat either collide or attack each other in the ancient past, and Mars and Earth were possibly moons of these planets. And they collided and created the asteroid belt. There should be a planet there according to physical law, but instead there's this ring of jewels, which is what was discovered.
Well, that's interesting to look at look at them as like a functioning like the moon, where it governs certain things.
Well, there's so many. How many water moons around Saturn and Jupiter? There's like 3 or 4. And so we and Mars could have easily been moons around another planetary body. And if you look at both of our planets, look at Mars. It's scarred across the entire surface, and its atmosphere is gone. Look at Earth. If we remove all of the water on Earth, what does our planet look like? Well, we're certainly not round. We look like Cookie Monster took a few bites out of the cookie. And then you add all the water and you have all these oceans, and some of them are massively deep and some of them aren't. And, our core is stitched together by gravity and magnetics, and here we are. And so are we the result of a massively scarred ancient, catastrophe? And you get into what is our moon? Well, there's the whack and the double whack and the, captured object theory. And now they're saying, oh, we were hit by this planetary object called Tiamat. Can they get any close to the mark? And it left a chunk of its metallic core in our core. Well, we don't know this because we have no idea what our core looks like, or any other planet's core for that matter. We can only hypothesize. Oh, but we know there's a metallic structure in the middle of our core. Really? We've drilled probably a couple hundred kilometers into the Earth, and that's it. We have no idea what our mantle or anything in the center of our Earth looks like. Nothing. I mean, we can hypothesize through satellite and trajectory, but we don't know. It's the same when we look at, planetary systems around other stars. Oh, this is a water planet because of how it blinks and the light that it gives off.
I feel like it's very telling that NASA has really admitted they have no plans to explore Venus whatsoever. I found that just hilarious. I find it so hilarious.
But the Russians have been there 5 times now. So. Or Soviets during that time. Yeah, no, it's a query, but we'll send out all these, solar probes that get closer to the sun than Mercury or Venus are. So we don't have the technology to send something back to either of these planetoid systems. And
that's what's interesting too, is like if they're saying we don't have that technology anymore to go to the moon, well then how are you doing all this stuff on Mars?
Yeah.
Make it make sense. Can somebody make it? Is there anyone in the chat that can make it make sense?
Are we filming Mars on what is it, Devlin Island in Canada? That is a good question. Are we filming Mars on our own planet? I mean,
the Arctic lemming is very I thought that was hilarious.
NASA put out a bunch of photos of all of their rovers in situ at NASA when they were being built. And all of them have what they call a color calibration plate, which has a red block, a green block, and a blue block. And so this gets back to my symbology of red, green, blue, triangle, square, circle. I've done a lot on symbology around this. So then when we get to Mars, they pan around with the cameras and they zoom back down to these color blocks, and they're all monotone, but different shades of monotone. And the ground scatter and the sky is all red. And so it's so obvious to anybody looking at this that they are color altering their photos. It's obvious. Why don't we have a red, green, and blue plate? our camera would be able to pick that up. It wouldn't see a deviation at that distance. It might looking at the horizon, but not at that distance. And so it's super obvious. And back to movies, we kind of get this weird telltale in the original Total Recall movie because, you know, here's Quaid, his original name in the book. We can what is it called? We can render this for you forever or something like in real time. It's some short story that was written by Philip K. Dick. Brilliant novel, but it's funny because when this movie came out, George Bush was the president and his vice president was Dan Quayle. And the character in the book's name is Quayle, so they changed it from Quayle to Quaid. And in the movie, it's fascinating because what he sets up for his dream sequence, the scientists in the dream lab are joking about it because they go, oh my God, you know, he wants this spy-fi thriller of an adventure. And the last thing that the guy says, blue skies on Mars, imagine that. And that's the final scene in the movie is when he's holding his girlfriend's hand and they're looking at the new atmosphere on Mars and there's blue skies on Mars. Well, if you look at the original Viking landings in the 1970s, photos from the surface of Mars, guess what you see? Blue skies on Mars. Not this orange tint that we're told, oh, there's so much iron in the atmosphere. And it's like, no, there isn't. There's moisture in the atmosphere. We found water in the Viking expeditions in the 1970s. We found water. But every time we go to Mars, miraculously, we found water for the first time. It's like, go look at the Viking reports. It's right there in the Viking reports. Moisture, water, and the whole 9 yards. Anyway, so yeah, Mars is a fascinating topic. I'm looking forward to you putting out your video because you definitely asked some amazing questions about that.
Well, anyway, you are a wealth of knowledge. It's always a pleasure to have you. This was amazing. I really appreciate it. And excellent presentation.
I appreciate the platform. Yeah, I hope everybody in the audience enjoyed this because, you know, there's a lot of knowledge out there and so much of it is corrupted. And, you know, I mean, even what I know isn't, you know, 100% there itself because none of us know unless we're a fly on a time machine wall going back into the past. We never really know what actually went on. So, yeah. Thank you, Julia, for an amazing conversation again. Getting close to the new year. Wishing you more happy holidays and a blessed New Year's. And,
thank you, Hans. We love you.
Check out our website, Megamist. I guess I spelled it wrong, but
because wait. So say
MEGAMYST, Megamist.
And be sure to get his book.
And on my how did I do that? That's kind of funny. Anyway, on my website, megamist.com, is my book on the Drompa Stones and Lores and Legends of the Buddhist connection to Sirius, along with South Asian connection to Sirius, and some other, you know, mysteries around NASA and other things. And I'm coming out with a second book, The Magic of Symbols, coming up here. Wow, in the next month. I just finished it. I think I have one more chapter to write, but I'm pretty much done with it. And I'm excited. In April, Julia and I will both be at Alien Event in Los Angeles, speaking there. There's also AI event. There's Alchemy event. I'll be speaking at Alchemy event on symbology and also a lot of what we talked about tonight. And there's a fourth one. I can't think of the name of it. But anyway, there's 4 events going on. Same time, same place. Be there, April. Links will be in the description. And yeah, thanks a lot for, again, the platform and everybody that's out there. Cheers. Have a good night.
Cheers. Good night, everyone. Happy holidays.
Watch the sun come up, beautiful, till it all burns out. We're like falling stars, miracles, dancing on the ground. And we're right with you to feel it strike deep dive. We're right with you, yeah. And we're right with you to feel it strike deep dive. Suffering grows, yeah. Let's say that life is beautiful.